Greetings, I'm Ching from YMAA Publishing Center, and today I'm talking with Sensei Bruce Costa, the author of our new coming book, Welcome to Karate. Um, Bruce, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit? Tell the people about yourself?
Good day, Gene, and thanks for your interest. So I operate a wonderful karate school. We're a philanthropic, Shotokan-based, traditional Japanese school of martial arts. We study mindfulness, and we're rather community-oriented. So that's kind of my main gig. I enjoy it very much, and I have the best students in the world.
Wonderful. So 2021 is kind of becoming the year of karate getting some spotlight in the public eye. And I wanted to ask you first off, what did you think of karate in the Olympics?
Well, Gene, my community is rather conservative, and that has many benefits. We feel that our karate is of very high quality. We're fastidious toward tradition, and the Olympics is something that's made my community nervous for a long time. I think they see it as something of a fall from the tradition. Not everyone, and I'm not of that opinion myself. I think that karate is a fantastic thing that should be available to everyone. It certainly occupies a part of my life that wouldn't have anything like that if it weren't for karate. So part of my thing is to make karate available to everyone. And I see the Olympics as helping very much in that. But more than a marketing opportunity, I see the Olympics as a way to dispel the notions that Hollywood generates about karate, that those of us who do what I do spend most of our time trying to dispel, right? It's just not the truth that violence is solved when you've studied enough karate. It's, violence is violence. Whenever anyone who is a new acquaintance learns that I have a karate life, they say, "Oh, don't, I won't mess with you," and I'm like, brother, I'd be on your side. And and furthermore, those of us who study this know that the more you study karate, the less you have to worry about us. So it's just the truth,
exactly. So now
But
your tradition is different than what they were doing in the Olympics in terms of sport karate versus your Shotokan, right?
I wouldn't go that far. We certainly have tournaments. This is something that Gichin Funakoshi, whom we consider the founder of modern karate, eschewed. He didn't like that idea, but his student Masatoshi Nakayama convinced him that tournaments were a good idea. And so, one could say we've been off the main track for a long time. The thing about tournaments is it's as close as you can get, I would argue, outside of a properly run black belt exam, which I think is closer, but it's as close as you can get to the real use of your karate outside of a condition of crime, right? So if you're defending yourself, then everything's happening. But most of us go through our entire lives without getting into that situation. So what do? You go into a dojo 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week, right? And there you are making sure that the opponent you have, who has now been your dear friend for many years, is in good physical shape to come back and see you again at the next class. So you can't be knocking into each other all the time. So tournaments where you face off against an intimidating opponent who is, often more than your equal, and you get to practice that serenity, that relaxation, the application of your techniques and force in a safe but intense way. And that's the value of tournaments. If you saw the intensity present in the Olympics, you saw it. Now, it's not that there weren't things to complain about with karate in the Olympics. And
Sure.
Many of my friends who are watching it felt as I did. We were like, oh, we're not in the WKF, the World Karate Federation, and they do things differently than we do, and we like the way we do them better. So we're, we're like, oh God, let us in there. But still, you saw the results of people in a lifetime of training displaying extraordinary self-control. There were some traditions that were thrown out that I didn't like, and there were some calls that were made that weren't correct. But what are you going to do? When my students go into a tournament and they get disqualified for something they don't think they should have been disqualified for, or they score a point that didn't get recognized, or a point was scored against them that shouldn't have been recognized. I saw many eppones, kicks to the head that, I'm sorry.
Well, let's kind of
give that to me all day. I'll be fine, right? You see any of those things happening. What I tell my students is, yeah, you need to up your numbers. You need to go to more tournaments. On average, it'll work out, but that's going to happen all the time. So when you take something like karate, where there's a lot of margin for error in all of the elements of it, the judging, the performance, everything, and then you make it so that, it's down to these last two, and man, that's who we talk about for the next 4 years. There's bound to be some errors, especially in the first go. So
yeah, well, let's cut straight to the chase. That gold medal match between Hamandi and Gonzadeh, the knockout that just DQ'd the competitor, and so the guy that got knocked out got the gold. That certainly became a laughingstock in the martial world on the whole. And I competed. I get it. The rules are such that you want to be safe, and so and this wasn't a knockout game. It's not a knockout sport. But what was your take on that?
I found that to be among the least interesting things I saw in karate at the Olympics. That whole moment gets classified under stuff happens, man. Stuff happens. We all know what we're in for. We all know we're going in at full speed, doing our best. Everybody, the energy's up. You're trying to correct for that. Bump up. Oops. That's the most you can say about that is it's an oops. I was much more impressed with Aka than I was with Shira. Fell in the red belt than I was with the fellow in the blue belt. But Aka was performing brilliantly. It was brilliant. He was brilliant in every way. And I think that you're going to see, should karate find its way back to the Olympics, I think you're going to see a future where this was the hairy edge beginning of what will be refined into something spectacular. You'd see more federations get involved. You'd see higher qualities arise. I thought the women's kumite was infinitely more interesting than the men's kumite. Again, the Ushira Mawashi Giri stuff to the head, where you would, that's a reverse roundhouse kick where it's like, whoa, I got near you, ho! 3 points. Go home, get the parade. To me, you'd never see that in the tournaments in our. You'd never see that scored so highly in the tournaments in our federation and other federations. So it's, hey man, it is what it is, and we're lucky to have it there. Kata was fascinating.
Yeah, that was really beautiful. What really struck me about the kata was that it's the first time we've seen solo martial arts forms performed on that level. So you can make a comparison to, say, solo figure skating or solo gymnastics, but that's all about the difficulty movements, and you really see that in karate kata. It was a different kind of difficult. They weren't doing flips like they try to do in wushu, or these
Right.
crazy stunt kicks that they do in taekwondo punse. And it was
Right.
different than I mean, taekwondo doesn't do a demonstrative; they just do kickboxing. And one of the things I will say about the Olympics thing, in my opinion, was that I felt that the kumite was much cleaner or made more sense to me than watching taekwondo kickboxing. I thought that kind of went off the rails. It kind of came back this year and was a little bit cleaner. But in terms of a kickboxing sport for the Olympics, I thought, I mean, I could follow what was going on in the karate fairly well. You know, it
Yeah.
seemed clear.
Well, you are an educated consumer, my friend. I remember the first time I ever saw taiko drumming. I was in my 30s, and I had been practicing karate and been paying attention to Japanese culture for many years, but I had never seen it. And all I knew was that I had no idea what I was looking at. It was mesmerizing. It was magnificent. And I think that that's going to be the experience of many, civilians, for lack of a better term, watching kata. It was amazing. And their form and their control, I just thought was absolutely spectacular. The worst of them was a wonder to behold. That was a real joy to get to see that displayed. But, there would be plenty of people who would complain even about that. I'm glad you brought up the other sports, because if you've never had the pleasure, watch gymnastics sometime with a diver. They will complain all day long about gymnasts getting high scores with forms that they would be absolutely looked over for, right? Legs aren't together, their feet aren't perfect, and in diving has to be meticulous, right? Similarly, boxers will watch that knockout kick, which wasn't even really a knockout. The guy, he was on the ground. I gotta believe that if he had to get up and do something in an emergency, he could have. Right? Yeah. So
That thought crossed my mind too. Actually, like
right.
we could just go and
You
get
saw
kicked in
that
the
close
head.
up. Yeah, I don't even, every boxer in the world who hasn't been in a karate tournament watched that and was like, give me a break. It shouldn't even count. And they've got those big puffy gloves on. Like, So, but hey, man, really, we're all talking about the 5% of what there is to worry about among specialists. 95%, you saw a piece of, you saw a practice that is centuries old, that's available to everyone. As I say in my book, it's available to everyone who can breathe and think. You can't say that about the vast majority of other things there were to tune into in Tokyo this year. So it's an overwhelmingly positive thing, and those were magnificent ambassadors to this concept we care about.
Well, I want to switch ambassadors to Hollywood and their misconceptions, since you had mentioned that earlier. The other major factor, I think, popularizing or showcasing karate right now is Cobra Kai. And that's coming, the next season's coming out this fall. What's your take on Cobra Kai?
I was really hoping we were going to talk about Captain America Winter Soldier, where he got to fight in Savate against Batroc Ziliper, but we won't do that.
Yeah, you and I saw that, but again, it's like the cultivation. Awesome. Yeah, okay, awesome. Fair.
Okay. But yeah, we all hunger for good martial arts, don't we? We all hunger for it in our beloved popular storylines. And Cobra Kai, man, if you had told me, hey, they're coming out with a new karate series, it's based on the original Karate Kid, I'm like, oh yeah, kind of like, Will Smith's son did already with Jackie Chan. Well, No, it's gonna have actually an aging, right? Daniel and Johnny, and they're gonna be still have that angst between each other. Oh, and it's about the next generation, and we get to go into their high school and we get to see them interact with each other at lunchtime. I'd have been like, oh my God, like nobody would have tuned into that, right? I am shocked by how riveting that series is. I think it's a masterpiece. And you can tell. Now, I'm sorry, but I'm going back to my film student roots here. And this is outside of the purview. But you can tell that the script handlers took every centimeter of footage from the original films and cared deeply about it and honored it and unpacked it and really tried hard to make everybody who's ever seen and loved them feel special, and that's how we all feel, man. And I can't say enough about the actors. Johnny, who doesn't love Johnny, and who can figure out why they love Johnny? It's the best. It's the best.
I'll talk about things that I never would have seen coming. That the next step is they're producing a musical. And there was a parody musical that came out years ago, but that wasn't official. This is an official musical, and what's it name? Cayman, the writer's involved, and it's anyway.
Wow. Well, I heard it first here, and I got to tell you, I can only trust. I'll take Karate Kid in space.
So what do you think the impact of this program is? I mean, I remember when Karate Kid came out in the theaters, the original, and the whole martial arts industry exploded. Yeah. And of course, right now we're in the era of COVID, so it's really hard to feel or really get a sense of how any sort of impact is on enrollment and such. But have you been sensitive to anything at your dojo in terms of like people coming in and like, I want to learn the Karate Kid techniques, I want you to train me in a junkyard. I mean, are you getting any of that, or?
Well, I'd be misrepresenting if I told you there was no Karate Kid conversation at my dojo, or Cobra Kai conversation at my dojo. But listen, it's worse than what you represented, right? Even without COVID, we're in an era where on your home television, there is so much entertainment available to you that it's in the form of postage stamps that you swipe by, representing hundreds of people's passion project each. Years of work and getting your script rejected until finally it lands. And what do you end up with for all that but a postage stamp on Netflix or Hulu? And so there's so many choices now. In 1986, when Karate Kid was released, this was during a time when all of us still were watching the same thing. Right? If memory serves, cable was new to most people. HBO was a big deal. Blockbuster was gaining ground. And so you still had a very common social experience, and you could still release something that would affect ancillary industries. Ever since cable really got going and Blockbuster really got going, I don't know that it's possible for a single thing. I used to have a comic book store, and I opened it when the Michael Keaton Batman came out. Yeah, it did better than it would have done otherwise, but you can't compare to what things were like just a few years earlier than that. And now I think it's so fractionated across different media, different platforms. Content has now become a term and has been for a long time. So no, I'm sorry to tell you, but parents of my students in my young classes, the 30-something parents, yo, sensei, did you see Cobra Kai? Yeah, I get a lot of that. and they're trying to give their kids something to do while, the poor teenagers in Cobra Kai get pummeled into bloody pulps with their parents nowhere to be found to deal with the consequences.
Interesting.
Yeah, I must say, as much as I personally enjoy it and I'm getting a kick out of it, it's not like I can put in my materials for new students. By the way, go check out Cobra Kai. The karate is much better now.
Right.
I don't want them sending their kid to my school and thinking they're going to have that result.
Right. It's not a particularly outstanding role model as some,
Right.
say, for example, Kung Fu Panda had more positive messages for the youth, whereas
Oh yeah.
and even the original Karate Kid movies had more of a positive tone for the youth.
Oh yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Kung Fu Panda. We were quite geared up to try to take advantage of anything coming from that, because it was clearly, that was a very good film, right? And I really thought very highly of it because it wasn't a Disney film, right? If memory serves, but it threaded that needle that Disney so often does, where it brings something excellent for its intended demographic, and there's lots of material going over kids' heads for the parents. So it really landed on all, was firing on all thrusters, and was directly up our alley. But yeah, nothing.
So now the $10,000 question in terms of media. What's your intention with your new book, Welcome to Karate? What's the mission here? What's the statement?
Thank you for asking, Gene. Yeah, so the reason I wrote that book, at the time I wrote it, I had already for many years, I've been doing this for 41 years, and I had already, that is doing traditional Japanese Shotokan karate under Sensei Teruyuki Okazaki, who we lost tragically to COVID. But he had retired a few years ago. I trained with him for 36 years. He's respected around the world. There's no one like him. He not only came to the United States under his teacher, Masatoshi Nakayama, whom I mentioned earlier, under his teacher's instruction to spread the faith, as it were. But he landed in Philadelphia and founded the International Shotokan Karate Federation, which grew into, scores of countries, and really was a welcoming, and it remains a welcoming entity. So that's my pedigree. We were JKA. We were with the JKA for quite a while. I have my first Dan ranks through the JKA, Japanese Karate Association. So that's kind of my formal background. And like everybody else who takes this seriously, I read every book that was written by all of the great masters. And I noticed, with the exception of Nakayama's Best Karate series, I noticed that for the most part, there are exceptions. There are definite exceptions. Randall Hassel comes to mind, but there are authors who are karate people first, as I consider myself, really. And they go through their entire lives, and you do this every day, all day long, and you come out with information that you're constantly promulgating to your students. And you think, yeah, I should just take the time to write this down, And so I did. But the thing I observed is most people who go through this process have one book in them. It's like one big book, and it's the story of their lives and the story of their experiences, because honestly, their experiences have been extraordinary. I tried to not do that. There's plenty of that with people that have much more significant experience than I do. What I tried to do was write a karate book for the rest of us, because I think karate is the sport for the rest of us, right? If you are a 14-year-old and you go out for soccer, or you go out for baseball or basketball, It is the same three awesome kids, practice after practice after practice, that you are trying to even be relevant in the company of, right? In karate, it's you versus you. And your sensei, if she or he are worth their salt, are going to hold you to that. And they're going to know when you can do better, and they're going to know when you are, really peaking, and they're going to know when you're sloughing off. It's really useful for developmental purposes for young people. And for those of us whose hair gets a little gray, it's really useful. It keeps you moving. It keeps you humble. After life has kicked you around for a while, it keeps you open-minded. So to me, I felt that was a hole that needed filling. It's welcome to karate. My job is to make it welcoming, right? There are many dojos who don't have any room for people, for viewers. There's no seating. They're a second thought. This is contrary to Japanese culture. In Japanese culture, honoring your guests is a big deal. And you put thought into seating arrangements and making them feel good. In my dojo, people aren't just able to come in. They're really strongly encouraged to stay and watch, especially young parents of young people. We really want them watching these classes because we're going to be using vocabulary with their children that doesn't happen in their homes. And we've done a lot of work on child development, developmental psychology, kinesiology, to create a variety of curricula that lead up to Shotokan that then enable them to prosper. It's got to be developmentally relevant, right? You've got to meet people where they are. And I take that from Shotokan, right? You come in, you train for 3 or 4 months, you test. If you do well, you get a yellow belt. You don't get a yellow belt without doing the work. You've got to be a yellow belt before you're a yellow belt. My book only gets you in the door, working with a sensei, and up to what you need for yellow belt. It is an entire book targeted specifically at the beginning process of entering this stringent, challenging, available discipline.
That's great. Well, I've read it, but of course I'm with the company, and but I give it my wholehearted endorsement. There were even I did Shotokan a long time ago. I was a little kid, and so I'm not going to claim to have any expertise or barely any memory of it. I don't even remember how to tie my belt. But
can we talk about that for a moment, Gene? Because I've got to tell you, 25 years ago, I was teaching karate. I was teaching to adults. And I was teaching in a school that only had adults. I had no living idea what could conceivably be a connection between children and this art developed in a patriarchal society for warrior use. I had no idea what are you even talking about? Now, of course, I did all my homework, and now I'm telling you, the best part of every day is watching these little ones really light up when we interact with them. It's such an overwhelming joy. I was so wrong. It is the best thing. Chuck Norris actually said it. He said, the best thing you can do for your child is karate. and I've got to tell you, I can't think of a better way to phrase it.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, go out and get this book, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our time here. And any shout outs you want to give in terms of people who want to follow you or where you are on social media?
Oh, well, very good. Well, the best place to find me is at my website, brucecosta.com. And there are links to all my social media presences. I'm on Twitter at sensei-costa. I'm on Facebook at Bruce Costa. Granite Forest Dojo is our Facebook page. Where else? I'm on LinkedIn under me. I'm everywhere.
Very good. And of course, you can find
Brandon Forrest Dojo on Instagram. I think that's the one I missed.
and of course, you can find him in the author profiles for YMAA. Bruce, thank you for your time. And it was a pleasure, as always, to talk to you.
Pleasure, my friend. Thank you. Los.